Day 16, Patriarchs, Genesis 31 through 32, Job 21 through 22, Proverbs 3 verses 9 through 12. Let's begin. Genesis 31:32. But afterwards he heard the words of the sons of Laban, saying, Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and being enlarged by his ability, he has become famous. Likewise he observed that Laban's face was not the same toward him as it was yesterday and the day before. Most importantly, the Lord was saying to him, Return to the land of your fathers and to your generation, and I will be with you. He sent and called for Rachel and Leah, in the field where he pastured the flocks. And he said to them, I see that your father's face is not the same toward me as it was yesterday and the day before. But the God of my father has been with me. And you know that I have served your father with all my strength. Even so, your father has circumvented me, and he has changed my wages 10 times. And yet God has not permitted him to harm me. Whenever he said, The speckled will be your wages, all the sheep gave birth to speckled newborns. Yet truly, when he said the contrary, You will take whatever is white for your wages, all the flocks gave birth to white ones. And it is God who has taken your father's substance and given it to me. For after the time had arrived for the youths to conceive, I lifted up my eyes, and I saw in my sleep that the males climbing on the females were of variegated, and spotted, and diverse colors. And the angel of God said to me in my sleep, Jacob. And I responded, Here I am. And he said, Lift up your eyes, and see that all the males climbing on the females are variegated, spotted, and also speckled. For I have seen all that Laban has done to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed the stone and made a vow to me. Now therefore arise and depart from this land, returning to the land of your nativity. And Rachel and Leah responded, Have we anything left behind among the resources and inheritance of our father's house? Has he not considered us as foreigners, and sold us, and consumed our price? But God has taken our father's riches and handed these to us, and to our sons. Therefore, do all that God has instructed you. And so Jacob rose up, and having placed the children and his wives upon camels, he went forth. And he took all his substance and flocks, and whatever he had acquired in Mesopotamia, and he journeyed to his father Isaac, in the land of Canaan. At that time, Laban had gone to shear the sheep, and so Rachel stole her father's idols. And Jacob was not willing to confess to his father-in-law that he was fleeing. And when he had gone away with all such things that were justly his, and, having crossed the river, was continuing on toward Mount Gilead, it was reported to Laban on the 3rd day that Jacob had fled. And taking his brothers with him, he pursued him for 7 days. And he overtook him at Mount Gilead. And he saw in a dream, God saying to him, Beware that you not speak anything harsh against Jacob. And now Jacob had pitched his tent at the mountain. And when he, with his brothers, had overtaken him, he set his tent at the same place at Mount Gilead. And he said to Jacob, Why have you acted this way, departing from me in secret, with my daughters like captives of the sword? Why would you want to flee without my knowledge and without telling me, though I might have led you forward with gladness, and songs, and timbrels, and lyres? You have not permitted me to kiss my sons and daughters. You have acted foolishly. And now, indeed, my hand has power to repay you with harm. But the God of your father said to me yesterday, Beware that you not speak anything stern against Jacob. It may be that you desired to go to your own, and that you long for the house of your father. But why have you stolen my gods? Jacob answered, I set out, unknown to you, because I feared that you might take away your daughters by violence. But since you accuse me of theft, with whomever you will find your gods, let him be slain in the sight of our brothers. Search, anything of yours that you will find with me, take it away. Now when he said this, he did not know that Rachel had stolen the idols. And so Laban, entering the tent of Jacob, and of Leah, and of both the handmaids, did not find them. And when he had entered the tent of Rachel, she quickly hid the idols under the camel's bedding, and she sat upon them. And when he had searched the entire tent and found nothing, she said, Do not be angry, my lord, that I am unable to rise up in your sight, because it has now happened to me according to the custom of women." So his careful search was thwarted. And Jacob, being inflated, said with contention, "For which fault of mine, or for what sin of mine, have you become so enraged against them? And searched all the items of my house? What have you found from all the substance of your house? Place it here before my brothers, and your brothers, and let them judge between me and you. For what reason have I been with you for 20 years? Your ewes and she-goats were not barren, the rams of your flocks I did not consume. Neither did I reveal to you what was seized by the wild beast. I replaced all that was damaged. Whatever was lost by theft, you collected it from me. Day and night, I was burned by heat and by frost, and sleep fled from my eyes. And in this way, for 20 years I have served you in your house, 14 for your daughters, and 6 for your flocks. You have also changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father Abraham and the fear of Isaac had not been close to me, perhaps by now you would have sent me away naked. But God looked kindly on my affliction and the labor of my hands, and he rebuked you yesterday." Laban answered him, "My daughters and sons, and your flocks, and all that you discern are mine. What can I do to my sons and grandchildren? Come, therefore, let us enter into a pact, so that it may be a testimony between me and you." And so Jacob took a stone, and he set it up as a memorial. And he said to his brothers, "Bring stones." And they, gathering together stones, made a tomb, and they ate upon it. And Laban called it, Tomb of Witness, and Jacob, Pile of Testimony, each of them according to the fitness of his own language. And Laban said, "This tomb will be a witness between me and you this day." And for this reason, its name has been called Gilead, that is, Tomb of Witness. May the Lord consider and judge between us, when we will have withdrawn from one another. If you afflict my daughters, and if you bring in other wives over them, no one is a witness of our words except God, who understands beforehand. And again he said to Jacob, "Lo, this tomb and the stone that I have set up between me and you will be a witness. This tomb, I say, and the stone, they are for testimony, in case either I cross beyond it going toward you, or you cross beyond it thinking to harm me. May the God of Abraham, and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us." Therefore, Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. And after he had immolated sacrifices on the mountain, he called his brothers to eat bread. And when they had eaten, they lodged there. In truth, Laban rose up in the night, and he kissed his sons and daughters, and he blessed them. And he returned to his place. Likewise, Jacob continued on the journey that he had begun. And the angels of God met him. When he had seen them, he said, "These are the encampments of God." And he called the name of that place Mahanaim, that is, encampments. Then he also sent messengers before him to his brother Esau, in the land of Seir, in the region of Edom. And he instructed them, saying, "You shall speak in this way to my lord Esau, your brother Jacob says these things, I have sojourned with Laban, and I have been with him until the present day. I have oxen, and donkeys, and sheep, and men's servants, and women's servants. And now I send an ambassador to my lord, so that I may find favor in your sight." And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, "We went to your brother Esau, and behold, he rushes to meet you with 400 men." Jacob was very afraid. And in his terror, he divided the people who were with him, likewise the flocks, and the sheep, and the oxen, and the camels, into 2 companies. Saying, "If Esau goes to one company, and strikes it, the other company, which is left behind, will be saved." And Jacob said, "God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, Return to your land, and to the place of your nativity, and I will do well for you. I am less than any of your compassions and your truth, which you have fulfilled to your servant. With my staff I crossed over this Jordan, and now I go back with 2 companies. Rescue me from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am very afraid of him, lest perhaps he may come and strike down the mother with the sons. You did say that you would do well by me, and that you would expand my offspring like the sand of the sea, which, because of its multitude, cannot be numbered. And when he had slept there that night, he separated, from the things that he had, gifts for his brother Esau. 200 she-goats, 20 he-goats, 200 ewes, and 20 rams. 30 milking camels with their young, 40 cows, and 20 bulls, 20 she-donkeys, and 10 of their young. And he sent them by the hands of his servants, each flock separately. And he said to his servants, Pass before me, and let there be a space between flock and flock. And he instructed the first, saying, If you happen to meet my brother Esau, and he questions you, Whose are you? Or where are you going? Or whose are these which follow you? You shall respond, Your servant Jacob's. He has sent them as a gift to my lord Esau. And he is also coming after us. Similarly, he gave orders to the second, and the third, and to all who followed the flocks, saying, Speak these same words to Esau, when you find him. And you will add, Your servant Jacob himself also follows after us, for he said, I will appease him with the gifts that go ahead, and after this, I will see him. Perhaps he will be gracious to me. And so the gifts went before him, but he himself lodged that night in the camp. And when he had arisen early, he took his 2 wives, and the same number of handmaids, with his 11 sons, and he crossed over the ford of Jabbok. And having delivered over all the things that belonged to him, he remained alone. And behold, a man wrestled with him until morning. And when he saw that he would not be able to overcome him, he touched the nerve of his thigh, and immediately it withered. And he said to him, Release me, for now the dawn ascends. He responded, I will not release you, unless you bless me. Therefore he said, What is your name? He answered, Jacob. But he said, Your name will not be called Jacob, but Israel. For if you have been strong against God, how much more will you prevail against men? Jacob questioned him, Tell me, by what name are you called? He responded, Why do you ask my name? And he blessed him in the same place. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, saying, I have seen God face to face, and my soul has been saved. And immediately the sun rose upon him, after he had crossed beyond Peniel. Yet in truth he limped on his foot. For this reason, the sons of Israel, even to the present day, do not eat the nerve that withered in Jacob's thigh, because he touched the nerve of his thigh and it was obstructed. Job 21:22. Then Job responded by saying, I beseech you to hear my words and to do penance. Permit me, and I will speak, and afterwards, if you see fit, you can laugh at my words. Is my dispute against man, so that I would have no reason to be discouraged? Listen to me and be astonished, and place a finger over your mouth. As for me, when I think it over, I am afraid, and trembling convulses my body. Why then do the impious live, having been lifted up and strengthened with riches? They see their offspring continue before them, a commotion of close relatives and of children's children in their sight. Their houses have been secure and peaceable, and there is no staff of God over them. Their cattle have conceived and have not miscarried, their cow has given birth and is not deprived of her newborn. Their little ones go out like a flock, and their children jump around playfully. They take up the timbrel and the lyre, and they rejoice at the sound of the organ. Their days are prolonged in wealth, yet, in an instant, they descend into hell. Who has said to God, Depart from us, for we do not want the knowledge of your ways? Who is the Almighty that we should serve him? And how is it helpful to us if we pray to him? It is true that their good things are not in their power. May the counsel of the impious be far from me. How often will the lamp of the wicked be extinguished, and a deluge overtake them, and how often will he distribute the afflictions of his wrath? They will be like chaff before the face of the wind, and like ashes that the whirlwind scatters. God will preserve the grief of the father for his sons, and when he repays, then he will understand. His eyes will see his own destruction, and he will drink from the wrath of the Almighty. For what does he care what happens to his house after him, or if the number of its months are reduced by half? Can anyone teach holy knowledge to God, who judges the exalted? This one dies strong and healthy, rich and happy. His gut is full of fat, and his bones are moistened with marrow. In truth, another dies in bitterness of soul, without any resources. And yet they will sleep together in the dust, and worms will cover them. Surely, I know your thoughts and your sinful judgments against me. For you say, where is the house of the ruler, and where are the tabernacles of the impious? Ask any passerby whom you wish, and you will realize that he understands these same things. That the evildoer is reserved for the day of destruction, and he will be led to the day of wrath. Who will reprove his way to his face, and who will repay him for what he has done? He will be led to the tomb, and he will remain awake in the chaos of the dead. He has been found acceptable to the banks of the river of lamentation, and he will draw any man towards him, and there are countless before him. Therefore, how long will you console me in vain, when your answer is shown to be repugnant to truth? Then Eliphaz the Themanite responded by saying, Can man be compared with God, even if he were perfect in knowledge? What advantage is it to God, if you were just? Or what do you provide for him, if your way should be immaculate? Will he reprove you and take you to judgment for being afraid? And not because of your many evil deeds and your infinite unfairness. For you have taken away the collateral of your brothers without cause, and stripped them naked of their clothing. You have not given water to the weary, you have taken bread away from the hungry. By the strength of your arm, you took possession of the land, and you retain it by being the strongest. You have sent widows away empty, and you have crushed the shoulders of orphans. Because of this, you are surrounded by traps, and unexpected fears will disturb you. And did you think that you would not see darkness and that you were not to be overwhelmed by the onrush of overflowing waters? Have you not considered that God is higher than the heavens and is lifted above the height of the stars? And you say, well, what does God know? And he judges as if through a fog. And the clouds are his hiding place, and he does not examine us closely, and he makes his rounds at the limits of the heavens. Do you not want to tend the path of the ages, which wicked men have spurned? These were taken away before their time, and a flood overthrew their foundation. They said to God, Withdraw from us, and they treated the Almighty as if he could do nothing. Though he had filled their houses with good things, may their way of thinking be far from me. The just will see and will rejoice, and the innocent will mock them. Has not their haughtiness been cut down, and has not fire devoured the remnants of them? So, repose yourself with him and be at peace, and in this way you will have the best fruits. Accept the law from his mouth, and place his words in your heart. If you will return to the Almighty, you will be rebuilt, and you will put sinfulness far from your tabernacle. He will give you stone in place of dirt, and torrents of gold in place of stone. And the Almighty will be against your enemies, and silver will be gathered together for you. Then will you flock together and delight over the Almighty, and you will lift up your face to God. You will plead with him, and he will listen to you, and you will pay your vows. You will decide on something, and it will come to you, and the light will shine in your ways. For he who had been humbled will be in glory, and he who will lower his eyes will be the one saved. The innocent will be saved, and he will be saved with purity in his hands. Proverbs 3 verses 9 through 12. Honor the Lord with your substance, and give to him from the first of all your fruits. And then your storehouses will be filled with abundance, and your presses shall overflow with wine. My son, do not discard the discipline of the Lord, and do not fall away when you are corrected by him. For whomever the Lord loves, he corrects, and just as a father does with a son, he wins him over.